Have you ever imagined that human evolution followed a straight line, from apes to ape men, and finally to us? The truth is far more fascinating. There was once a time when at least 6 to 9 different human species lived side by side on Earth. We've all seen the famous image of evolution, a line of figures marching from ape to modern human, one species replacing the next. But that picture is actually a misleading oversimplification. Human evolution wasn't a straight line at all. It was more like a dense, branching bush, with many different lineages emerging at the same time, while others disappeared along the way. Let's travel back 2 to 3 million years to Africa. This wasn't the home of just one human species. It was home to several, living at the same time. One of the best known was Australopithecus, an early upright walker and one of the closest known ancestors of modern humans. But Australopithecus wasn't alone. Living alongside them was another relative called Paranthropus, famous for its massive jaws and the prominent crest on top of its skull. Those enormous jaws allowed Paranthropus to chew tough plants, roots, and hard-shelled seeds, while Australopithecus survived on a much more varied diet. Rather than competing directly, these two species followed different survival strategies, allowing them to share the same environment. Around this same period, a third species appeared, Homo habilis, the first known human to regularly make stone tools. So within a relatively small region of Africa, at least 3 different human species were living side by side at the very same time. Then, about 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus emerged. They were taller, had larger brains, and became the first human species to leave Africa. Homo erectus traveled remarkably far, reaching Java in present-day Indonesia and what is now China, where scientists later discovered the famous Peking man. Meanwhile, not all Homo erectus left Africa. Those who remained continued evolving into a new species known as Homo heidelbergensis. Homo heidelbergensis eventually split into 2 major branches. One migrated into Europe, while the other stayed in Africa, setting the stage for 2 future human species. The group that settled in Europe gradually adapted to the harsh Ice Age climate and eventually became the ancestors of the Neanderthals. The group that remained in Africa would, hundreds of thousands of years later, evolve into our own species, Homo sapiens. But the story doesn't end there. Somewhere else in Asia, a mysterious third human species was quietly living its own existence. These were the Denisovans, a human species that science only discovered through a handful of tiny bones found inside a cave in Siberia. To this day, no one knows exactly what the Denisovans looked like, yet traces of their DNA still live on in some people across Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Farther south, on a small island in Indonesia, another extraordinary human species lived in complete isolation from the outside world. This was Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit by scientists because adults stood only about 1 meter or just over 3 feet tall. Living in isolation on an island with few large predators, their bodies gradually became smaller over countless generations, a phenomenon known as island dwarfism. Deep within a complex cave system in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered yet another human species, Homo naledi. Homo naledi had a brain no larger than some of our distant ancestors, yet they may have intentionally buried their dead, a behavior once thought to belong only to modern humans. During roughly the same period, Neanderthals lived in Europe, Denisovans in Siberia, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, Homo naledi in South Africa, and Homo sapiens had just emerged in Africa. Around 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. For the first time, they encountered relatives who had already been living across Eurasia for thousands of generations. In the Middle East and Europe, Homo sapiens met the Neanderthals. They didn't just coexist, they also interbred. Today, most people whose ancestors lived outside Africa still carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA within their genomes. In Asia, Homo sapiens also encountered and interbred with the mysterious Denisovans, leaving genetic traces that still exist in some populations across Southeast Asia and Melanesia today. For a period of time, Earth was home to at least 6 different human species, all living at the same time, sharing the planet and competing for survival. But little by little, one by one, our ancient relatives began to disappear. The final populations of Homo erectus, surviving on the island of Java until about 100,000 years ago, quietly vanished. Around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals, who had survived countless ice ages, also disappeared from Europe. The mysterious Denisovans, along with the tiny hobbits of Flores Island, disappeared during roughly the same period. And eventually, only one human species remained on Earth: Homo sapiens, us. Scientists still debate the answer. Was it our more complex language, our ability to cooperate in large groups, or perhaps just a little bit of luck? If one of those human relatives had survived until today, what would our world look like? Perhaps the most remarkable part of our story isn't that we outlasted everyone else, but that for millions of years we were never alone on the journey of human evolution.